Hi guys, so this is hypothesis testing. So you'll see down, if you look down through the steps here, a lot of what you have to do here is to do with working out margin of error and working out confidence intervals. So if you're not sure how to do confidence intervals, then just have a look back at that first, because that's a big part of this. Hypothesis testing anyway. So if we look at the steps here, we're going to write down H0. So H0 is the notation for a null hypothesis, so we'll go through what it means afterwards. And H1 is the alternative hypothesis. Then we're going to write down or calculate the sample proportion, so P with a little dash over it, so that means sample proportion. So you should have seen that before. Then we're going to find the margin of error. Should have seen that before, and write down the confidence interval for the population proportion P, and that's all just finding out confidence intervals. Then the last part, if the value of the population proportion stated is within the confidence interval, do not reject the null hypothesis and reject H1, reject the alternative hypothesis. If the value of the population proportion is outside the confidence interval, then reject the null hypothesis, the H0, and do not reject the alternative hypothesis. So we'll go through the example anyway. The Kennel Club claims that 30% of households keep a dog. So it's claiming that 30% of households in general keep a dog. So that's what they're saying. So to test this claim, a group of statistics students carry out a survey of 400 households. And the results of the survey found that 112 of the 400 households kept a dog. So what we're really being asked is that based on finding out this information that 112 out of 400 keep a dog, we're asked, is it reasonable then to say that the 30% of households keep a dog? So that's what we're asked to test really. So let's start anyway. So first step is to write down the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. So the null hypothesis will just be the claim really. So in this case it's that 30% of households keep a dog. So that's the null hypothesis. That's kind of basically what the claim is, or what what they want to test. The alternative hypothesis then is just going to be the opposite of that, so that 30% of households don't keep a dog. Or that the figure of households that keep a dog is not 30%. So it's basically the opposite. If we move on to step 2 here then, so write down or calculate the sample proportion. So sample proportion is denoted like this, or is denoted, like this. So it's P with a little dash over it. So this is something that hopefully you've seen before. Well, it says that the results of the survey found out that 112 of 400 households kept a dog. So 112 out of 400. And if you put that into a calculator, then it tells us it's 0.28. Okay, so that's the sample proportion. Next part, we're going to find out the margin of error. So I'm just numbering the steps the same as they are over on the left hand side. So margin of error is 1 over the square root of n, and the sample in this case is 400 because 400 households were tested. So 1 over the square root of 400, and if you put that into a calculator, then it'll tell you that it's 0.05. So we're going to write down the confidence interval next. So that's number 4. So confidence interval then is going to be 0.28 plus or minus 0.05. So 0.28 minus 0.05, and if you put that in the calculator it'll be 0.23, and then we're going to do 0.28 plus 0.05, and that would be on a calculator then, or you can just kind of add in your head there, it'd be 0.33. So that's our confidence interval then. So we're 95% sure that it's in between these two, that the number of households that keep a dog is in between 0.23 and 0.33. So we're at our last step then. So the last step is just accepting or reject, well, it's accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis, and if we accept it then we have to reject the alternative, and if we reject the null hypothesis then we have to accept the alternative. So between 0.23, so what we found out is that between 23% and 33% of households keep a dog. We found out that we're 95% sure that between 23% and 33% of households keep a dog. Therefore, the claim was that 30% of households keep a dog. So because 30% is in between this confidence interval, 30% is less than 33% and it's more than 23%. Therefore, we accept the null hypothesis. And reject the alternative hypothesis. So we're basically saying that the claim that the the Kennel Club over here made, we're basically saying that that claim is correct, that because it's in the confidence interval. Right, so here's another question then. So if you just want to pause the video and maybe have a go at this from scratch, just follow all the steps and then play it on and I'll go through the answer for you. Right, so if we start off anyway, the null hypothesis here, so a school principal is claiming that 45% of students were in favour of a change to school uniform. So our null hypothesis, or H0, would be that 45% are in favour of change to uniform. So if that's the null hypothesis, then the alternative hypothesis has to be pretty much the opposite, so that 45% are not in favour. So that's the second part, kind of pretty much done. So third part then is it's asking us here is to calculate the margin of error correct to 2 decimal places. So a margin of error is 1 over the square root of n. So in this case there was only 120 students who were surveyed, so it's actually just 1 over the square root of 120, and that's approximately 0.091 when we round it off. So that's the margin for error. The next part they're asking us to work out the sample proportion, so that's just going to be the number of basically successful results. So the results of the survey found that 42 students were in favour, so 42 out of the 120. So when you put that into a calculator you get 0.35, so that's our sample proportion. So I should put in the symbol for it as well there. Next we just need to work out the confidence interval then. So part V is to work out the confidence interval. So that's going to be the sample proportion plus or minus the margin for error. So in this case it's going to be 0.35 plus or minus 0.091. So if you put that into a calculator, for this part we get 0.259, and then if we add on 0.091 we get 0.441. So what we found out is that we're 95% at the 95% confidence interval between 0.259 and 0.441 of students want a change to uniform. So if we're to convert that into percentages, it's 25.9% and 44.1%. So let's look back at our two hypotheses at the start. So our null hypothesis was that 45% are in favor of a change to uniform. So that's what the school principal claimed. And then our alternative was that 45% are not. So what you'll notice is that the null hypothesis, the 45%, is actually outside of our confidence interval. So I know it's pretty close to 44.1%, but it's not within our confidence interval. So therefore we must reject the null hypothesis this time. So for this one then we're going to reject H0 and accept the alternative hypothesis in this case, so that 45% are not in favor of change to the school uniform.